Okay, hi. Well done for getting your blogs in. I've been enjoying marking them. So far the standard of what I've seen looks good. Looks like there's been some benefits in doing some practice together. These next sets of workshops this week and next week, I'm going to start looking at some of the... I'll change my mind about what I'm doing next week. Don't worry about that. What you do need to be aware of is by the end of term, you're going to have chosen a company and written an audit, a background document on them, and over the next 2 rounds of workshops, not necessarily the ones that begin tomorrow, but before that, we will do some practice work related to what kind of things you might look at and how you might go about doing it. But that's in the distance. Don't worry about that. Today I want to talk about search engine optimization. I also want to talk more generally about Google, the power of Google, and some of the ways that that we need to be aware of it when we think about how people use the internet and how that relates to marketing. So I'm going to look at the importance of Google as a search tool and then go through how search works. How many of you were in IT 222 last year? Lawrence Olver and Andrea Ben's module where you did SAP and stuff. Let me know. Just hold a little bit more. I just want to get a sense of how many. Thank you. Okay, yeah. You weren't in it last year. Year before, maybe. Year before. Yeah, year before. Yeah. Good. I know you were at placement last year. So I used quite a lot of this lecture for second-year undergraduates, so some of you may think, yeah, I remember that, I've seen that before. Hopefully there's new nuances on it. It'll make better sense in the context of you now studying digital marketing. But I apologise if a certain chunk of the slides are like, yeah, we saw that on the slides last year, because you did. So I want to remind you that the context in which I'm going to think about Google and search is related to Chappie's framework on digital marketing that suggests that at the heart of companies' own media relationship with their potential customers and others is their website, and that much of what we think about in digital marketing is how to get people to go there, and you have looked in some depth at the role of email and that. We're going to look at social media in a while. So we're thinking here about how search engines drive traffic, and before Reading Week I looked at search engine marketing paid presentation of company links on Google. Now we're going to look at how it happens organically. It matters immensely because Google's organic linking to websites impacts how many people visit websites in a really, really deep, quantifiable way. So this quite cool picture of cooling pipes from the underside of a Google server farm is there because Sky News ran a story a couple of years ago now about how when Google stopped working for an hour or more, people stopped visiting websites on the internet. 40% of traffic dropped off. Regardless of what site it was, obviously that's an average 40%, but people around the internet who are running websites suddenly said, oh, no one's visiting us today. Why is that? Oh, because Google isn't working. It doesn't happen very often, but there have been a couple of big outages in 2013, the one on the previous slide in 2009, and there's lots to indicate that if users don't have access to Google, they're unable to reach the websites that they want to use, and that matters, and it gives us a sense of how profound the impact is. And if you were unlucky enough to be visiting Google trying to find a website at the point when those outages will happen, you get a server 500 or 502 page basically saying, sorry, I is not working. Anthropomorphized broken robot. Doesn't happen very often, but it's happened in the last year for a few minutes here and a few minutes there. And it matters because Google is really at the heart of how many of us experience use of the internet. For example, Chaffee says to a group of people, you're thinking about going on holiday, and an ad pops up saying cheap flights to somewhere. How do you respond? This was in, I think this survey was about 2010 or 2011, so before mobile dominated. Okay, so of the people, they are already primed, they're already thinking on holiday, and they see the ad. Only a quarter of people say, so what I do is I click on the ad. If we think back to the lecture that I gave you 2 weeks ago on paid search, that seems fairly consistent with, for example, your own responses. Most people in this room 2 weeks ago said to me that they have never clicked on a paid search link. Only a few of you do. So about a quarter of people would click on the ad. A quarter of people would go to Google and would type in easyjet.com if the ad was for EasyJet or British Airways. So they would search on the ad. They know who's got this offer now, but rather than follow the ad link, they go to Google, and about nearly a third would go to Google and type in something that gave them a more of a comparative view. So something like cheap flights too, rather than EasyJet, so they can see who else is offering. So these two give us about 57%, nearly 60% of the respondents said, I'd go to Google. And this third, who directly go to the advertiser's site, I would posit that now, in an era of mobile, they're no longer doing that. Very, very few people type full URLs into browser address bars. We almost all use the Google search box as a way of typing a partial URL, BritishAirways.com, and allow that to be resolved for us or something. Anyway. So that's the kind of context why it's important. I want to talk now a bit about how search works. And I've got a set of slides that are taken from a Google Roll-In Roadshow. And I'm going to see if the Roll-In Roadshow will work because it's more up to date. Let's see if, but if it goes problematic, I'll just go back to the screenshots I've got. So how does search work? It starts off with indexing of web pages. So according to this moment of the presentation, unlike we've only got an hard copy, there are about 130 million pages currently indexed, and this index is growing all the time. And the indexing is done using a metaphor that's been around since the World Wide Web was, I find it a bit confusing. Yeah, no, it's all right. That's good. A metaphor of crawling. So there's no literal crawling, of course, there's no physical stuff that, arguably there's no physical stuff out there, but what there is a software algorithm that reads a page and says, there's a handout just over here, reads the page and analyses the page for links, and then uses the link to retrieve the page that the link is to, and therefore retrieves another page and analyses that. And so this metaphor of crawling is the following of links, including links to images and video and any other types of embedded content, the retrieval of it and the indexing of it. So here is a page, it contains this image, this image, this image, this link, next page, this link, here is a page, following on. Owners have a role in helping that happen or blocking it if they want to. So from the dawn of the World Wide Web, there's a convention called the robots.txt, a text file created in something like Notepad on Windows. So if you put on your website a page called robots.txt, I've got a website, asher.com, I have. Google will go there and say, is there anything called robots.txt? And that text file lists the pages I don't want Google to index. If they do not list these pages. And we can see that happening if you think about things like a sophisticated website like Amazon. Amazon must have thousands of pages that are shopping basket links. So if Google followed all the links on a product page on Amazon, one of those links would be add this to a basket, and the page they get back would be saying, oh, you're thinking about buying this, but they don't index that because it would be not very useful for if I'm searching for a product and I get led to an Amazon page that is effectively a shopping basket with that product in, but I haven't had a chance to read it. So there's control about it. Indeed, more fundamentally than robots.txt, one could build a page on a website and create no links to it. And if there are no links to it, the Google algorithm would never crawl to it unless someone let the cat out of the bag and tweeted, hey, there's this hidden page. And some of those companies do that with things like special offers, like a page that has offer prices for selected customers that you email them about and you try not to have as a page that can be found on the internet. Things like offer codes, voucher codes are often managed that way. So, Google's software crawls through the pages, following the links, retrieving the pages, and then filing them up. Ooh, file it. It's the first time I've done this with it rolling. I thought it'd be nicer to have current data rather than slides that are a year old, saying 63. Yeah. This tries to help us understand about what happens with the data that Google has retrieved as it follows the link. So what it does is it builds a list, an index of all the pages that it's visited and the words that are on the pages. So in this rather simplified schematic, they show us a page that is called String Theory, that somewhere says it's a page about a type of physics, and that it's made by a website called pBrain. And in this visual representation, this page is filed away under an index item, like in a filing cabinet drawer. String Theory, another one, pBrain, and another one, physics. Actually, it's even more simple than that, because at its most fundamental, the page is filed against every word that's in it. So if this was a page that's, well, it is a web page, if we sort the pages by their content and other factors, Google would file this page as a page that has the word "and" in it, and a page that has the word "by" in it, and a page that has the word "pages" in, and also each combination of those. So if we searched on Google for "sort the pages" in quote marks, there'd be a good chance that we'd find this page, because it's an instance of a page filed in the index as a page that has "sort the pages" side by side. So every combination of words that is in the page is filed away for future retrieval. So that initially sorted by their content and other factors, we'll think about the factors, and that list is their index, which today they say is 100 million gigabytes big. That's the list of all the pages they've got, listed multiple times against every single record that could relate to it. So that's how they get their good shit. Then what do they do with it? Well, we experience it as searchers, and our interaction with search is an interaction with an algorithm. So when we go to Google and type a search term, we're interacting with an algorithm that is interrogating that index. So an algorithm could also be described as a program or as a formula. And when we query Google by typing in a search term, the search term is, sorry, I find it a little bit confusing waiting to see what they're going to show us. Yeah, here we are. The search term is processed by an algorithm. So if we type in string theory, the response is an interaction between the algorithm and the index and the words. So the algorithm is trying to return for us, the user, the pages that are most likely to be the ones we want, that will satisfy our needs from the index. And a number of factors are used in terms of trying to understand what we're looking for, including things like spelling. So if we actually type in spin theory, which is not that unlikely, Google, the algorithm, will say there are very few pages indexed against the concept spin theory. It doesn't seem to be a thing, but string theory is a thing, so well, let's assume perhaps that string theory is what you're looking for. That even as we type the words, Google will, so if you type in string and then start typing the word theory, it's not very likely that you're going to type in string the, although it might be string the turkey up for a recipe, but it will anticipate that we might be looking for the word theory and offer that to us. The algorithm will take into account how we are doing the search. So, for example, if we're voice search, speaking into the OK Google prompt on the Android system, or if we've taken a picture of something and are using Google goggles, the algorithm responds differently depending on what the input is. Is it a set of typed words or what? We'll look for synonyms, so other words that mean the same thing, to try and find pages that might be about string theory, but actually talk about small particle physics and weak attraction, which I think probably would involve and answer the question, what is string theory? So there's this kind of synonyms and also understanding. And query understandings, one of the ways that we can see Google really changing within probably your recent experience. So if we type in a search term, for something that is the name of somebody, Google won't just look for pages that are about Brad Pitt, but will also the algorithm will interpret your search as something where you want to know about Brad Pitt. You don't necessarily need to know which is the best web page about Brad Pitt. You might just want to know when he was born, some films he's been in, or see a picture of him or something like that. And with the Google Instant algorithmic intervention, Google will also look on your Android phone and see what calendar appointments you've got, where you are in the world, or whether you've had lunch recently, and will make suggestions based on your personal context as mediated by what Android knows about you at that moment. Anyway, using those clues, Google will retrieve pages and will return them based on things like the match between the words you've searched for and the words in the index that relate to that. But for most search terms, there are a very large number of results. If we look at how many came back from Brad, what did we get? 59, nearly 60 million results were found. So the key thing for Google is not, can I find some pages about Brad Pitt, but which are the ones that are most likely to be the ones that this user will click on, that will satisfy the need of the user. And Google say there are about 200 factors, and I think that hasn't changed in years. I think there are probably a lot more. I think they just pulled that out of a box, as you know, 200 is a big number in it. Some of the factors they consider are things like the quality of the page and the quality of the site. In the second half of the lecture, I'll look at what that means in terms of if you're running a website, what would a quality factor be. But they also look at the freshness of the content, how recently it was updated. There's a tendency to favour content that's been created recently, that's changed, that hasn't stayed the same for long periods of time. They'll look at things like preferences and settings on the search tool. So if you set your search to favour a particular language, to give results in a particular language, or to avoid pornographic images, something like that, Safe Search will not return the results it would have, because it will look and say, well, you didn't want them. And increasingly Google is drawing on user-generated content, so it's a very fine balance between quality pages, might be things like pages that come from the university or the government, but they're static, they don't change, they're enduring. Something like string theory, I bet there's a really good page at Harvard University all about string theory that was written in the 90s. Freshness, well, if it's not been changed for a long time, maybe it's not as good as something. And has it been created by an individual, like a blogger, which gives a sense of authenticity? And Google is trying to balance those all up. And the way they do this is changing all the time. At the end of the lecture, I'll go through some of the major changes that have happened over the last few years. Oh yeah, look, we got these. These are new to me. Universal search and translation. I don't even know what universal search is. That wasn't there last time I looked. I know what translation is, so Google will offer you, if you type in something in Spanish and you're an English user on an English browser, the first thing it'll offer you is a translation for that. And then the results will be shown to you in different forms, depending on what platform you're searching on. So if you're searching on your phone, you get a different set of results. They'll be localized. The way they're laid out will mean that you get at least one image fairly high up in the results. If you're searching on a desktop PC, you get more of the Google understanding, where Google says, oh, hold on, maybe we can just offer you information about the subject without you needing to go to a page. Tablet somewhere in between the two. I'll just do fight spam and then do the little video. So, in contrast to the story that they are trying to find the best results for you, they are also trying to avoid you finding results that companies wish to force upon you. And they count that as spam, and they talk about it in terms of like a battle. So all the time there are pages that might seem to be relevant, but Google deems them not relevant, and they do that by using the algorithm to interrogate the page for factors like repetition or false claims. And On the basis of that, they will not return results. They will delist results if they don't think they're relevant. And this sometimes goes wrong. So quite a few years ago now, I think about 2009, Google delisted all the BMW showrooms in Germany. Official BMW showrooms, if you went to Germany and you searched on a browser, where can I buy a BMW, you wouldn't see a BMW showroom because Google felt that those websites, those official showroom websites, were over-egging, were over-promoting what they were doing. And for a little while they were delisted, removed, but Google do allow the owners to take action, to say, I've made changes, you've made a mistake, and respond so the owner can fix the site and notify them. To see how often this happens is a bit out of date, but what I would like to show you is a video that gives you a sense of how all this process of indexing, evaluating the search, and then measuring up the pages to be returned is changing very rapidly all the time. So this is a Google video, so it's a bit self-promoting, that talks through how they make 500 improvements each year to their search algorithm.
The search algorithm is made up of several hundred signals that we try to put together to serve the best results for each user.
Just last year we launched over 500 changes to our algorithm, so by some count we change our algorithm almost every day, almost twice over.
We really analyze each potential change very deeply to try to make sure that it's the right thing for users.
The first step in improving Google search is coming up with an idea.
There are almost always a set of motivating searches, and these searches are not performing as well as we would like. Ranking engineers then come up with a hypothesis about what signal, what data could we integrate into our algorithm.
We test all these reasonable ideas through rigorous scientific testing.
The first is with raters. These are external people that have been trained to judge whether one ranking is more relevant and higher quality than another.
We show these raters side by side for queries that the engineer's experiment might be affecting. We also confirm these changes with live experiments on real users.
And we do this in something that's called a sandbox. We send a very small fraction of actual Google traffic to the sandbox. We compute lots of different metrics.
In 2010, we ran over 20,000 different experiments. All the data from the human evaluation and the live experiment are then rolled up by a search analyst.
For each project, it's usually one analyst assigned from the moment that we're talking to the engineers, trying to learn about their change.
And the impact is quite small, as you see.
We then have a launch decision meeting where the leadership of the search team then looks at that data and makes a decision.
That surely we should pick.
Ultimately, the goal of the search eval analyst team is to provide an informed, data-driven decision and present an unbiased view.
Okay, so not the crew, the team will understand what's happening. If our scientific testing says this is a good idea for Google users, we will launch it on Google.
For many years now, Google has been offering spelling suggestions for queries that contain typos or misspellings. So sometimes you'll type a query and you might see, did you mean, and then an alternate query. If you type a misspelling of your medicine and you don't click on the did you mean, you might be getting results that contain that misspelling, and they tend not to be high quality results. So we thought about a different kind of interface that we call full page replacement. And instead of did you mean, you'll see at the top of your page showing results for. And in the case that we made a mistake, there's another link, search instead for, and it has the query that you typed. We call that link the escape hatch. For every time a user had to click that escape hatch because the spelling algorithm made a mistake, we wanted to make sure that there were 50 other times that they got the right spelling suggestion and they didn't have to click the did you mean. And they were also looking to see in the live traffic data how often were users clicking on that escape hatch to make sure that the user signal that we get from live experiments was lining up with the signal that we get from our rater evaluations. We brought it to launch committee, and based on the rater evaluations and the live experiments, it was pretty clear that the engineers had done what they were supposed to do, and so we launched it.
When you align Google's interests with users' interests as we have aligned, good things happen.
We've put a huge investment into understanding what works for users.
Is this change going to help users not only in the United States or in English, but all over the world?
I think we get excited when we feel like we've hit on an idea that really helps a lot of users.
Users keep coming back to Google even though they have a choice of a search engine every time they open a browser.
Okay, so that is very much Google telling us what they want us to understand is the good things that happens to users every time users' needs are aligned with Google. And I think that we should, I want to pause just for a moment to be critical and think this is a company that is a profit-driven company that has immense power in terms of its relationship between users and content. In the second half of the lecture, I'm going to flip it around and say, well, we're marketers, we want to play it, we want to be not necessarily the spammers, but we would want our companies to be found by Google, by users. And there are a number of ways in which we could critique Google, and probably I think in the workshop I'll get us to think about some of these. But if we just think about one concept like net neutrality for now, the idea of whose traffic is the most important on the internet and whether the money that's being paid towards the internet is a factor in that. So this is a set of critical considerations which you might want to reflect on before the workshops, and in the workshops I'll think about it in more detail. Nearly 16 years ago, Introner and Nissenbaum said, what does it mean if we're not indexed? If someone can't find you on Google, do you even exist? Okay, it's a sociological question, but it's also a very real question for businesses. If you're in a competitive environment and you're listing something that Google says, we've just removed 2 results from this page because we don't want you down, not we don't want you, we'll get into trouble if we help you download Game of Thrones, then those sites with those listings, do they cease to exist? So the role of organisations is to be found, to build a relationship with their customers, and this site that Chappie's that I've shown you before is quite a useful way of building a set of stepping stones for a digital marketing strategy, and you might want to return to it later in the module. But for many companies, where do we want to get to is about can we be found? If customers are looking for the product or the service or the brand, will they find us on Google? So for the second half of the lecture, I'll look in a more instrumental way at what marketing people can do in order to make it more likely that their products and brands will be found. So Google recognised that search engine optimization is a legitimate activity for companies to engage in. There's a whole industry of search engine optimization and many jobs to be found in it, and it's a very competitive and difficult industry, partly because of this tension between Google saying, yeah, we recognise that this is the process of maximising the number of visitors who come to a website based on the returns from Google, and on the other hand saying we fight spam 24/7. Google say we fight spam 24/7 because they're trying to make sure that the results returned are the most appropriate ones for their users. There's a tension there. And in terms of actively addressing that, if you are running a website, if your strategy, you are looking at a website and trying to say, what should this website do? Malaga et al. Put together a very good list of things that could be done. Generally, knowing the words that people are searching for and that you're going to get indexed against is the key to understanding the relationship between Google and your website. If you think back to the algorithm and the filing away of data, it's the keywords that are at the heart of the relationship between content, searches and the Google index. This is the process of being indexed. There are things that you can do on the pages of your website, and then there are things that you can do around the internet to bring links. So I'll look at each of those over the next few slides. So probably the most important concept in considering the relationship between a website, Google and search is the words that people are using and the words that are used on the website. So keyword research, if you're looking at a website thinking, how can this be found? What we do to make it more likely to be found is about what people are going to search for. So phrases that people might use. So you might run a business that offers a particular kind of product. You might I don't know, sell retro watches, and you might say this website sells retro watches. But maybe somebody is going to search for a old-fashioned watch with a leather strap, or gentleman's watch with traditional fixings. So if I build a website that says I've got retro watches, the best retro watches, and all my watches are retro, and somebody searches for an old-fashioned watch with historically accurate fixings, no match, no good. So understanding the phrases people will use, the synonyms they'll use, different ways of describing your service, and then thinking about the different ways you can use those words in your website is the start point of search engine optimization. Kilorin and Shi et al. Both looked at the importance of the kinds of phrases, and one of the things that one would do would be to use something like Google Autocomplete to understand the nuances of how people describe different kinds of things. So it turns out, when I took this screenshot, that if people were trying to fix something, it tended to be a physical thing, like a puncture, a leak, or a tap. Whereas if they were trying to mend something, it included more emotive things, like a broken heart. So if I was running a dating website and I looked at this keyword research, I might say, we should have blog postings that say this website will help people mend their relationships and mend their broken hearts and mend their love life. And it probably isn't so useful to say, we'll fix you up with a hot date, because it turns out people don't type, how can I fix my love life? And location. Increasingly, there are so many websites competing for the same space that the defining feature will be, is it near me? Not in all instances, of course, but if you're running an organic vegetable delivery service, having a website that is really optimized for organic, fresh, healthy vegetables, but doesn't mention that you're in Brighton and not in Portsmouth, is going to disadvantage you, because actually when people buy vegetables, they're going to say something like, where can I buy organic vegetables in Portsmouth or in Brighton? There's no good knowing that there's a really good vegetables shop 100 miles away or 500 miles away. So location is increasingly important. And one can think about those long tail phrases. So many people won't just type in vegetables or organic vegetables or even local organic vegetables, but they might type in something like organic vegetable delivery service in Hayden's Heath. So a long tail that captures the phrases that people are going to use is probably a good idea. But how far can we go with this? Well, Skira et al. Trying to kind of find a good balance, because if you tried to capture every variant of the ridiculous phrases I came up for with my watch, it would really be very cumbersome if you had a website that said, I sell retro watches and the straps are authentic and genuine old-fashioned, and it's like it was a long time ago and looks like stuff from the war and blah, blah, blah. At some point it becomes nonsense. What is the balance? Well, they reckon that about 20% of the top keywords got about 98% of searches. So in practical terms, if you're looking at a website and you're thinking, what should I do to improve the keyword match? Probably searching for 100 keywords and then picking the 20 that are most frequently used would be a good sort of rubric, a good rule of thumb. But you can't include every phrase, but you want to experiment a bit. So that's keywords. I'm going at this a little bit fast. We're okay, we've got time. The mechanics of getting indexed, of actually telling Google where your site is and making sure that it's linked from Google, pretty simple, but if you've got a new website or a website that seems to be under-indexed, notify Google it exists. Much more complex and what will take a lot longer is improving the way the site is constructed and what is on the site. So I'm not going to look in any detail at the makeup of web pages, but even if you're non-technical, you should be aware that different bits of the page do different jobs, and that something like the title of a page, let's find a page with a title. The title of this page is Us Weekly Brad Pitt. Well, I put Brad Pitt first, but it's US or Us Weekly, Us Weekly. So the title is the bit that shows up in the browser tab address bar. It is also the bit that shows up in the Google listing as the link, and it is the single most important element in terms of if Google is trying to weigh up the words someone searched for and the words that are in their index, the title of the page is the one. So this page will show up very well on keywords like hypocrisy and freezing. This one's got Brad Pitt in, but it won't show up so well for Billy Bob Thornton. Billy Bob Thornton's in the text of the page, it's not in the title. So the title is the first clue to Google that that the content of the page is about a particular thing. Also in the heading tags, the top heading within the displayed area of the page and the subheadings, and also in the alt tags, which are what are used to label images. So images are quite interesting because for users, they're very evocative. When I look at a page, the pictures speak 1,000 words, to use an old cliche, but it's quite difficult for Google to know what a picture is of. They do have algorithms that do some analysis, but knowing whether a picture is of Brad Pitt or not, or of a retro watch or not, if the alt tag says a picture of an attractive watch with a brown leather strap, Google will index that and say that's something this page is about. And the indexing is of the keywords, so if we think back to the previous two slides, that the things you want to have in the words, in the title, in the headings, in the alt tags and throughout the page are phrases that state the user's need as a problem waiting for you to solve, synonyms and descriptions of the service you offer. So you want to have the keywords on the page, but not too often. If a web page says the same thing again and again, at a certain point Google will count it as spam. It's a very typical kind of thing for Google to use to try and identify a page as spam. If you've got a web page that says cheap flights, these flights are cheap, we've got the cheapest flights, at a certain point Google said, well, it said cheap flights 25 times out of 30 words on the page. This site doesn't read, it's nonsense. And that's known as keyword stuffing, and it's a risk if you go too mad on this keyword research. Other things that you can build are links to related pages within your website. So if you've got, sorry, I've got stuck with my watch, I like this useful. If you've got a website that also has a guide to selecting different types of watches, or the history of the Swiss watch or something, links on a page to other related pages on your own site will make it more likely that Google thinks this is an authentic website with lots of useful information about watches. This would be the one Asher wants when he's searching for old-fashioned watches. So internal links, video, social media, and freshness. So change, once you've built a good page, don't leave it. Go back to it every couple of weeks and add something new, rearrange it a bit, because Google gradually thinks that a page is of less relevance as it's been unchanged longer. So I mentioned this idea of keyword stuffing, that you can't put like cheap watches, cheap watches, cheap watches again and again. Susie and Weideman did a really good study where they built 5 laptop websites that were basically identical. There was a single web page with a domain name that was very similar, Get Laptops 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. They did this in South Africa, I think. Anyone know ZA is South Africa? Somewhere in Africa. I don't know. Did you say you think it is?
It is.
Thank you. So, and basically, the text of the page was all very similar. So, you know, we sell laptops, and they're very good, but they put the keywords in with increasing frequency. The same number of words, 330, and on the most dodgy version of the site, the word cheap laptops was in there 90 times in those 330 words. So it was almost unreadable. We've got cheap laptops, these are cheap laptops, buy cheap laptops. And so this was the density of the keywords. And basically, these 3 stopped showing up in Google search almost immediately. So Google delisted them as being too dense. And so I think a keyword count up to about 20%, but of course it changes. Google is changing its algorithm all the time. So be cautious, but increasing your keyword repetition to a point that's readable, but maybe up to about 1/5 of the content being keyword. Is that right? 20%? No, I'm sorry, that's absolutely not 20%. 20 instances of the keyword in 300, that's less than 10%. Please don't create websites with 20% keyword density. We'll all get killed. Other factors you can control is the name of the page, the name of the site, the title. With your blogging, I'm asking you to be very thoughtful about the title. I'll give you marks for the title. The title generates the URL, the address. And generally, titles that contain the keywords, that don't have things like product IDs, but instead of actual words. So this is Wikipedia and this is IMDb, both about the same film. And the Wikipedia page about this film, Still Walking, is still _walking_ film. That's an excellent set of keywords. If I go and search for, I'm looking for a Japanese film called Still Walking, then it's going to find that because it's highly specific. So those are things that you have control of if you were running your own website, or if in your strategy for this module you were thinking about a website and saying, what could we do to get it more search friendly? Those are the easy ones. Because those are the ones that you can wake up one morning and think, okay, we'll put some more keywords in the site and make sure the outtakes are good. Much more difficult is the complex thing that Google does relating to pages that link to our site. So when Google was invented by Brennan Page in the late 90s, their key innovation was to say it's not just what the page says. That's not really a very good measure of whether the page is any good or not. The real measure is whether other people are linking to it. So they invented this hypertext web search engine, which is all about the links. And that is still the key thing in Google's algorithm. Although they talk about the index being a list of pages they've retrieved, the evaluation of whether one page should be ranked higher than another primarily comes down to how many links there are to it. So they call this science page rank. And they're basically looking for authority. They're looking for someone who knows, who says, listen, this is the way it goes. So this site is good. Because not only does B link to it, but B's receive links that come from a whole range of sites. So if we think about how we might know whether a restaurant is good when we're searching for somebody to go out for dinner in Brighton, one of the things we'll be looking at is does an influential site like TripAdvisor list it and give it good reviews? It's almost like a metaphor there. The idea that, because TripAdvisor consolidates individual reviewers, actually TripAdvisor is not a great example. How many food bloggers have reviewed this restaurant in the last few months would give us that is independent, different voices around the internet saying we like this place. That is the key way that Google's PageRank evaluates a website. So it looks at the number of links and the authority of the link. So a link from TripAdvisor is different from a link from a random blog, is different from a link from something like an official organisation like a university or a government body. So the authority of the linking sites are sometimes called the domain authority. How much do we believe this website is a useful place to refer to recommend somewhere else? So we're one step back from your site. We're not talking about the website you run, we're talking about the domain authority of who links to you. And that's based on things like the number of links they have, the age of the site, social signals. So getting a website like the BBC to link to your business is likely to have a very significant impact on how high it is ranked by Google. What can we do about that? And also the text that one links with. So if you had a link from the BBC saying, this is a restaurant in Brighton that serves terrible food and a lot of people got ill eating there, that would be less good. It would actually push down your ranking for good restaurant, although it might push up your ranking for bad restaurant. So the link text has an influence. So if you are finding ways to get other websites to link to you, the text that they link on, that say, here is a place where you can find the best prices, is of some relevance. In fact, the link text has such an influence that sometimes people try and play with Google and manipulate it. There was a period in the mid-2000s when George Bush was president, when loads of bloggers who hated George Bush or were unhappy with George Bush wrote blog posts saying the President of the United States is a miserable failure, and that was a link text to the White House website. Now the White House website does not have the word failure on it anywhere. And yet, when the screenshot was taken, which was quite a few years ago, if you searched on the word failure, the fifth best page about failure, according to this manipulated Google bomb, was the President of the United States. And more recently, I apologise if this is a little bit rude for anybody, but I don't know if any of you have been looking for wank puffins recently. But wank puffins are a thing, you know, and it's a funny kind of word. It makes you laugh, good. I do apologise if it's not a word you want. But for a short while, sometime early the week before last, if you typed in that word at Google, that's what you got. You know, and he didn't want it that way, I don't think. I don't think it was some clever sort of once removed strategy to make us all laugh. And, God, what a bit of a wank puffin. Love the guy. You know, people around particularly on Twitter, were using links to him and using that word next to his name to build an association that Google responded to for a little while. Okay, so that's not probably what you want to get found for, but you do, if you are running a website and optimizing it, you do want to have links that say things that are related to your offering, and there are ways you can do it. So Google's official definition, if we go back to their definition of what search engine optimization is, would be that you should build relevant content that is of high quality that matches the needs of the people. So if you've got the best website on the internet with all the information about old watches with brown leather straps, they'll find you. But there's a lot of websites that mention a lot of stuff, so that probably isn't enough. So beyond natural link building for having good quality content, other things you might do would be to generate PR. That maybe you send a picture of your watch to 30 influential bloggers and say, would you mind writing a story saying that, there's this thing, and I sell it, it's interesting. Does that work? Yeah, it might do. If you've got genuine news about something, an innovative product, or something that meets a niche, perhaps if you send that link to bloggers, retro gentlemen's stylings websites, maybe they would write a thing about, one of the things that guy might think of as his watch, and he has a website for sort of watches, maybe, if you're lucky. You could do a competition. That's much more likely to get results. If you said, the 10 best blog posts will get a free watch, maybe many people would write a blog post about it. Or you could send them a watch for free. So increasingly things like video bloggers, social media, brand advocates and influencers receive a substantial income de facto by being sent £50 worth of Zara vouchers each week so they can write something about the latest bit of kit they've got from Zara. And as long as there are some ethical considerations there where the boundary is between paid content, sponsored content, genuine content. And there are ethical boundaries, there are practical boundaries. If Google thinks you're abusing it, maybe Google will delist you. There are ethical boundaries and there are practical boundaries, like if their readers think she's only writing about Topshop because they gave her vouchers, I don't think she'd have bought that coat anyway. Maybe, I don't know why I say she, I'm not being misogynistic, because a lot of fashion blogs probably are women. But the selection of product, if it's so clearly done just because you were giving it for free, and then you say, oh, it's the best thing ever, then is that authentic to the people who listen to that blog? But links is links. You can write to people, say, give me a link, and I had some guys come here and do a presentation from I can't remember, an agency in Brighton, name's gone out of my head, who talked about working with bed and breakfast and hotels in the area and writing to places like universities and saying, if you're organising a conference, would you list us as one of the places that people could stay when they are visiting for the conference? And because a university is a high domain authority site, getting a link, even if it's rather an obscure one, on the Brighton University website that says this bed and breakfast in Kent Town is a possible place to stay, can have a significant impact in making that site more likely to be found than another if someone types in bed and breakfast Kent Town. So you can request inbound links, particularly if there's something relevant, if you're offering something that has a reason to be linked to. There's reciprocal link building. You show me mine and I'll show you yours, but Google If Google spots it as just an exchange of links, it will count that as not a genuine link. You can buy links. You can buy 10,000 blog posts, quite possibly in China, for not very much money, 100 quid probably will get you 10,000 blogs that all point to your website. But Google will call that black hat. Google would say that was spam, and Google would probably block your site if suddenly 10,000 rather random, not terribly well written blog posts in China all links to your website. And you could go out and create, you've seen how easy it is to create a blog. You could sign up to Blogger and create something in 15 minutes that could say guide to best watch sellers in Britain and then link to your own site. Again, Google would call that black hat. And black hat is an industry. There are people who work on the margins of what is ethical. Lots of us, aren't there? Probably all of us. But there are people who explicitly say, I'll break the rules and get you to the top of the Google ranking. There are forums where it gets discussed. So blog networks where people blog about each other's products, snippets of content that are spun and reused with slight variations of wording. It's not a very nice world, and I think it's in the lecture on search engine optimization you should know it exists, but I don't think it's a good place to play out one's career, or if you had a business and you wanted it to be popular. I think this is a very short-sighted way of working with the opportunities. And Google are really working continuously to fight spam, as they say it, and updating their algorithm several times a year. So just recently they've come up with Penguin 4, which is real-time anti-spam, that at the moment that the search occurs, a comparison of the link in sites is made to try and evaluate whether the result has been artificially pushed up the index. Not all the updates to the Google algorithm are to do with fighting spam. We saw one that was to do with making sure that people didn't buy their medication from dodgy websites that can't even spell the bloody name of the product. There's been a lot of changes that relate to things like finding local results. If I'm stumbling home at night, typing in kebab on my phone, directing me to somewhere that's round the corner, and is mobile optimized. But a lot of the updates do effectively break search engine optimization. If you've built a website with 20 out of 330 keyword, 20 out of your 330 words in keywords, an update that pushes anti-spam or does semantic search or looks for keyword stuffing might break a website that yesterday was happy in the sense that it's easy to be found, and today is not. We're nearly out of time. I think I'm nearly out of lecture, aren't I? Oh yeah, I wanted to leave you with a critical concept of the risk of content that is built to meet search terms of an anticipated searcher, and more generally the way that Google's influence is one that creates what Eli Parisa calls a filter bubble, that maybe we only see the stuff that we think is interesting because we only see the things that are optimized for the keywords we're searching for. This is stepping back a bit from marketing, and if you don't want social critique, you can phase out. But I think that if we try to understand why so many people didn't see Trump was going to win, recognizing that the news feed that liberals get in some of their social media presents a different picture of the world to what someone who owns a gun and lives in a Midwestern state in America might see as their daily representations of the Democratic Party and so on. Or in this country, I don't know how many of you were shocked by Brexit being the thing it was, but I think that a lot of the way that the Google and social media, but I should go back to Google, specifically works, is that we see the stuff we're looking for. And so the world looks like what we think it should look like, because Google is very good at not just taking the keywords we search for, but also remembering what we looked at before as individual users if we're logged into our phones or our Chrome browser, and looking at analysing what links we clicked on, what are the pieces of content most likely to be the ones that we would want to see as search results, and that has some quite profound impacts, which include the impact on marketing. And I'll stop there. Out of time. See you in workshops tomorrow, some of you, I hope. Slideshow ended, still recording, stop.